Tonight, as our guest moderator, we have Miss Benita Billingsley Harris. She is the Regional Policy Director for Dominion Energy, which includes Hampton Roads and Northern North Carolina. In the role that she serves as liaison for media, elected officials, and community leaders. Prior to Dominion, Benita was the communications manager for the Norfolk Sheriff's Office, where she produced motivational videos for inmates and supported community programs. Benita started her career in broadcast journalism, which brought her to Hampton Roads to work at WVEC TV. She was an Emmy award-winning TV and news reporter, earning several local and regional and national awards. She worked at WVEC TV in Norfolk, Maryland Public Television, WJZ TV in Baltimore, WFAA TV in Dallas, and WXIA TV in Atlanta. She is a magna cum laude graduate of Spelman College in Atlanta and earned a master's degree in journalism from the University of Missouri, Columbia. Benita is passionate about education and has served 4 years on the Chesapeake Public School Board. She and her husband, Elijah Cadillac Harris, a retired teacher from Chesapeake Public Schools, are parents of 3 lovely daughters and 1 beautiful granddaughter. In addition to having our wonderful moderator, we have several awesome parents who will be assisting us in this courageous conversation. At this time, I'd like to turn the program over to Ms. Benita Billingsley Harris. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Lisa, and welcome everyone. I appreciate that beautiful introduction, Lisa. Thank you so much. My family just walked in, so hopefully you won't hear them too much in the background, the joys of working from home, right? And virtual teleworking. But good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us. I really appreciate you coming to this important panel discussion. As we all know, racially intense news has been the norm these days, and it's only natural that our children would have questions about race. And while it's a hard discussion, it is a necessary discussion. We have an amazing panel of parents with us tonight who are going to talk about this issue with us, and I would like to introduce them now, starting with Dr. Jacob and Christina Ankeny. There they are, waving, thank you, thank you. Wilfredo and Amina Bonilla are also with us. Good to see y'all. Shannon Gray is with us. There you are. Hi, Shannon. Niani Haley, who is a social worker with Chesapeake Public Schools, is with us. Thank you. And we also have Michael and Tanya Harvey. Brenda Hernandez Solomon. Eugene Holloman, who is now Dr. Eugene Holloman. Dr. Holloman, thank you for joining us. And Amber Reese. So thank you all so much for joining us for this great discussion. We want all of you to know that this journey to promote awareness, understanding and acceptance and inclusion of others, regardless of class or race, gender, sexual expression, or ethnicity, is important for us to all understand each other. And with that being said, we want to hear from you through our Let's Talk app. Parents, students, community members, and stakeholders are encouraged to provide feedback, comments, recognitions, and celebrations to assist us in moving forward. Information sent through that app can be anonymous. We will use the information to guide future planning. Lisa?
Okay, so let's go ahead and we can go ahead and start with our first question for tonight.
Okay, first question tonight for our panelists is, and first of all, I want to thank Chesapeake Public Schools first for organizing this panel. I think it's so important. Educators play a huge role in the development of our children. And of course, you as parents are the first educators for our kids. So thank you so much for joining us. So the first question is, why is it important to have conversations about race and diversity with our children? And how might these conversations differ between families of diverse backgrounds? So who would like to take that question first?
Hi, this is the Bonilla family. We'll take that question.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Will Bonilla, and this is my wife, Amina Bonilla, and we are excited and honored to be a part of this webinar. This is certainly something that we're excited about. Family and family empowerment. We're part of the Chesapeake family, we're part of the Virginia family, and we're part of the family of the United States of America. What we want to do is we want to instill upon our children how we can build them up and build that foundation within them, build self-confidence, build their self-esteem, explain to them the importance of their history and the contributions that we've made to American society in all facets, military, science, medicine. And also at the same time, raise them to appreciate not only their culture and where they come from. I'm Puerto Rican, my wife is African American, and my children understand the importance of both cultures, but also teach them to appreciate and understand the importance of other cultures. Get to know other cultures, other people, and where they come from, and appreciate that. We have to lead by example, and we have to teach them to become overcomers and to break down barriers. One of the ways to do that is to educate them. Talk to them about people that they don't talk to in school, or maybe they don't know. I know for us, we created a program called RISE, Reading in Schools with Esquires. I'm a federal criminal defense attorney, and I wanted to reach out to other students in Title I schools because I'm not supposed to be a lawyer. I come from a very impoverished background, but I am an overcomer too. So we know that we lead by example and show our kids that. We talked to them about the examples of Thurgood Marshall, how he became the esteemed civil rights lawyer who desegregated schools in the United States and became the first African-American United States Supreme Court justice. He broke down barriers. He's an overcomer. Paul Robeson, I went to Rutgers University, and Paul Robeson was only the third African-American to ever be admitted to Rutgers in 1915 to 1919. He was a valedictorian, two-time All-American, and a global activist. These are people that they wouldn't know about if we didn't teach them, because it starts in the home. And in addition to that, one more person, by example, is Dr. Jose Barbosa. He's the first Afro-Latino from Puerto Rico to graduate with a medical degree in the United States of America from the University of Michigan in 1880. So when our children look at us and say, it's hard, when we're at a school that's predominantly white and we go to, Hickory or some other school, we look to these examples and say, well, you have to be an overcomer. You have to break down barriers. You have to let people in and share your culture with them as well.
Very well said. Thank you so much, Mr. Bonilla. Mina, would you like to add anything to that?
I think he covered it, but I mean, in our house, we do have a lot of conversations about letting people in, but also keeping in mind who you are as a person. And I'm very proud that our children are doing just that.
Excellent. Lucky children to have you as parents.
Thank
Brenda
you.
Solomon, you had some good points to make on this subject when we were talking earlier. Would you like to add something quickly to that, to answer that question?
Yes, ma'am. Just like the Bonilla family stated, I mean, Mr. Bonilla pretty much covered it all. To me, communication is key to ensure that we're communicating with our children at an early age and talk about what's going on in the real world and prepare them mentally for what's out there and what to expect and how to react in a manner where there's going to be a positive outcome and more so become proactive, vice reactive, and trying to react after the fact. And then again, as well, coming from a biracial family, Mexican-American, African-American, even then it's difficult sometimes kind of explaining to them the different cultural backgrounds. So the sooner we start off as parents, the better, and more so the easier their lives could possibly turn out as they become adults as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. One of the things we've often talked about too is fact versus perspective, and people don't know what to believe anymore when they watch the news, for example. You just hear so many varying reports on the same topic. It's very confusing to adults, much less children. So I want to ask the panel next, what tips do you have for discussing race and social justice issues with your children? And also, how do we help our children distinguish between facts and perspectives in the media? Lisa Carey, would you like to start us off with that? I'm sorry, yeah, Lisa. Oh, I have put you down here as a note, Lisa, because Of course, Black Lives Matter has been a huge topic in the news, and I wanted you to share your story about that.
Yes. So, during that movement, I always talk to my kids about loving everyone. They're good Black people, they're, bad Black people, they're good cops and they're bad cops. And you need to embrace everybody. You need to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. So at that particular moment, I put on Facebook, All Lives Matter. And I was taken aback because I received so many messages from of my friends who were really upset at the fact that I posted this information. And once I had a dialogue with them, I understood the rationale. Yes, all lives matter, but it's a time and a place. And at that point in time, it was a matter of Black Lives Matter. It was a movement in reference to the incident with George Floyd. Yes, all lives matter, but at this particular moment, this Black gentleman, was the reason behind the whole Black Lives movement. So I ended up taking it down, but I totally understand. So I think sometimes we need to be careful when we are voicing our opinions, and just know when to say things and the appropriate times to actually give your feedback and your feelings, because we need to be cognizant of other races around us. And I know, Brenda, we had a conversation about this as well.
Yes, we did. My only thing with the movement is a lot of people have misconceptions about the movement, saying that it's a terrorist group or whatnot. And the reality is, in my opinion, is the movement is to bring about awareness. I feel that until every cultural background is acknowledged, then we can say together that all lives matter. But when you pick and choose and you're not even educated on the different cultural backgrounds, I don't think that can even be a part of who we are in general in the world, period. So I think it starts off by, trying to educate our children, because they're going to be the next, our next future. They're going to be our next lawyers, presidents, teachers, letting them know that we need to acknowledge everyone's cultural background in order to say things like, all lives matter. We can't pick and choose or only do so because it's beneficial to us or in a specific situation at that moment in time. That's all I wanted to provide.
Thank you for adding that point. It's been an interesting discussion, and a lot of times people don't understand why folks are offended if you don't say Black Lives Matter. And I think what's implied in that statement is that Black Lives Matter too, because society has not said other lives don't matter, but Black people feel as if society has said Black lives don't matter. So we're saying Black Lives Matter. So I have 2 teenage daughters at Great Bridge High School as well, and I was very proud of them for participating in Black Lives Matter protests, and they recruited a nice, diverse group of their friends that all participated. But one thing I feel like they were a little confused about was they cut off some of their friends they would say, oh, well, she's an all lives matter person. So to them, for someone to say all lives matter to them made them feel as if what they were saying is Black lives don't matter. So it's just an interesting topic because people take it in different ways, and it's important for us to understand each other's different perspectives so we have an opportunity to find common ground and to understand where each other are coming from. So thank you, Lisa and Brenda, for sharing that story as well.
Ms. Harris, may I jump in really fast?
Please.
I have 3 elementary school children. By the way, my name is Eugene Holloman. I live in the Great Bridge area, and the All Lives Matter conversation does come up a lot, and it's really uncomfortable, right, on all sides. And so I learned to not just dismiss when I don't agree with someone else's perspective, right? And we're going to have a messy conversation, but we have to understand the nuances to having those conversations and the differences of opinions. And so if we allow ourselves to really sit down and listen to each other and not just come up with facts or I want to prove my point more than listening to yours, if we can really have an understanding and try to understand where the other person is coming from, then the conversation, and we can reach the next step in that conversation. So that's what I'm going to do. When I heard a friend of mine say, all lives matters too, but then it was a time for us to have a deep dive. It was an uncomfortable conversation, but he understood where I was coming from, and I understood, whether right or wrong, where he was coming from, and we were able to walk away from that conversation with a common understanding.
Absolutely, and that's what it's all about. Jacob and Christina, did you all want to add anything to that conversation?
Sure. I just wanted to mention, we're a military family. I'm a military physician. And one of the things I think is important is sharing of perspective, because as you age, you're getting more experiences, and we certainly get more perspective. But if you don't share that with your children, then they're not gonna be able to expand upon your experiences. So, for example, when I was with the Marines in Okinawa, we lived in Okinawa. We taught them all about the culture of Okinawa. We engulfed ourselves in that culture and understood what the people were about, and we wanted to be respectful and know what their culture was, so we didn't cross any lines and offend them. With the Marines, I went to Mongolia and South Korea. And even with those, we have cultural briefs, and we discuss things, because you don't want to do the wrong thing and offend that culture. And I bring all of those experiences back to my kids, so they learn from that. Also, from my tour in Iraq, I tell them how the other kids live, and other people lives, and other families live, just so they know that they have it better than a lot of other kids out there. And then as a doctor, I share my experiences of treating patients. I can treat Black, white, Hispanic, criminal. I am to not, I'm not to differentiate and treat anybody different. I just treat them as the patient that comes in. And that's one thing. Also, I remind them of uniforms too. One of the biggest reasons why we have uniforms is to kind of break down that barrier. So all you see is that camouflage uniform, and you see the different branches, but you're not necessarily looking at Black or white or Hispanic or any other races. So I just want to share that it's very important for us to share our experiences, so our kids learn from our experiences, because they might not ever get to the situation. My kids probably won't ever go to Iraq and Mongolia and all these places, but I can at least teach them, and then they know. So when they ever come across a different situation, they'll know to think more broadly about the situation.
Absolutely. And also empathize with other people that may have different perspectives, different cultures, different points of view. So that segues us into the next question, and that is, what can we do to encourage intercultural empathy and understanding within our children? And the follow-up question is, how do we help our children avoid forming stereotypical views from people who are different from them? Amber,
Yes.
would you like to tackle that one?
Miss Carrie, I'm sorry, did you have something to say?
Yes, I know Mr. Harvey had waved his finger. He wanted to make a comment on that last statement, so I didn't want to.
Okay, sorry. Thank you for catching that. I didn't see Mr. Harvey.
No
Sorry about
problem.
that.
Sorry, Mr. and Ms. Harvey.
No, thank you for having us on the panel and welcome us into this crucial and critical conversations amongst having it with our kids and having it in the community as a whole. So we really welcome it and appreciate it. But one of the tips that we were talking about was, how do you do that? How do you get your kids to partake in understanding that there's different races and there's different social injustices that may be in the world? One of the things that I have kind of taken upon myself to try to look at is to cover your eyes, right? You cover your eyes, what do you see? We don't see color. There is no color. The only color you see is darkness, right? And if we keep going down a path of just seeing darkness, we will never really see the true fruits and flowers that others people have and other cultures that they are. So when Dr. Jacob was talking about, wearing different colored uniforms, well, that plays a part, but you're still one unit. When you're wearing different uniforms and you're going out and you're performing that mission, you're still one unit. So when you instill that in your kids, that color doesn't matter, you love all, to try to make sure that you understanding all perspective and bringing those perspectives to the table. And when you're fighting as one team, as a unit, you're kind of unstoppable. And that's one of the things that gets lost in translation. Instead of trying to do things as an individual and taking color into consideration, if you do it as a unit, we would all get much further when it goes to that. So one of the tips, that's one of the reinforcing tips, is hey, cover your eyes. Think about it from that perspective. If you got your Ray Charles and your Stevie Wonders, right? They're blind. They were born that way. However, they didn't know what their color were until someone told them. There was no way for them to know until someone told them, and you can't go off of voice and how they sound because that doesn't matter. It's all in appreciating the people for whom they are. That's what I had to say.
Good point. And
Thank
wouldn't
you so
life be
much.
boring if we were all the same? It's an excellent point.
Thank you. Thank you, Amber, too. Thank you. I appreciate you guys.
Yes, me too, because as I toggle back and forth between screens, I don't always see someone waving their hand. So thank you, Lisa, for catching that. That was a great point. So Amber Reese, would you like to pick up on what we were discussing about just encouraging intercultural empathy and understanding within our children? What's the best way we as parents can do that?
Hi, I'm Amber Reese. I have a child at Hickory Middle and a child at Hickory High School, but I also serve as an instructional coach at Truett in South Norfolk. So kind of a different perspective of Chesapeake. But I would say to kind of piggyback, start those conversations early. And we have conversations at dinner, conversations in the car, but that started when they were little. It's what are they watching? Starting with cartoons. My daughter made a comment when we were kind of discussing some of these questions over the weekend. Princesses, all of the princesses when she was little were white. And so are you exposing them to other types of people, other types of cultures through literature or through your television? Have your children experienced something like racism within their setting? And sometimes that starts at a very young age. The book Chocolate Me, I used even with fifth graders. And if you read it and then say, how do you self-connect with that? Because you don't want to obviously say, have you experienced racism with them? You want to frame that to where they're going to offer that if that has happened, but you don't want to kind of place that idea in their head. And as I have fifth graders remembering things from first grade, and they're in a Title I school. Our community is 95% African American, and so even within each other, they were experiencing some racism just because of tone of skin color and so forth. So having those conversations with my own children and kind of what do you kind of see? How do you connect with this? Or watching with now that my daughter's in high school, watching movies kind of like The Hate U Give or documentaries of 13th when all of the riots were taking place, and kind of discussing that and saying, this is what's going on. This is why people feel that way. And so she's now that mature teenager who can kind of speak for herself because we've had those conversations. And so she's comfortable framing a question to her friends saying, let's think about their side for a second. What are they thinking? And it's important that I raised her that way because I love the community that I serve, and I wouldn't want her to take on any sort of bias and makes a classmate feel uncomfortable. And so she's certainly she has her own opinions of how to approach that, but she's very strong and is okay speaking up. And I appreciate that about her. To get to the second step of how to avoid the stereotypical, that's going to be the variety of exposures. Do they see that you have a variety of friends, or who are you associating with, and what are you watching on TV? Is it a diverse cast, or are you always, if there are other people of color within that series, how are they portrayed? Are they the main characters, or are they always like the criminal, or are they always like this? And so you have to kind of be careful because even the media or even television will kind of stereotype things, and you don't want them seeing only that. So always having those conversations, and then it leads to news once they're mature enough to handle that, and having some of those discussions of what do you see here and what can we do about it as a teenager or as an adult, and just having those conversations. And I do that in my classroom too, because I find that that's important. I don't stray away from having a conversation about race just because I'm a teacher. So you can do that with dialogue, you can do that with journaling and having conversations. And then if you have a concern, you can reach out to the parents and say, I think we need to have a conversation about this, and be comfortable with that.
Yep, I think those are great points. And I want Shannon Gray to jump here in a second, but Amber, I wanted to pick up on something you said. Really, it might not be easy to find multicultural dolls and books that have multicultural figures in them, but it really is important. I remember when I was young, I wasn't allowed to watch Shirley Temple. And I thought she was so cute and I loved acting and dancing, so I wanted to watch her, but all the Black characters in there were servants or, just not strong, positive characters. So we were allowed to watch Sesame Street, which apparently was very radical back in the day, and some networks wouldn't even play it because there was diversity. So we've come a long way, and I think your point about starting young is a very good point. And Shannon Gray, I know you have a biracial son, so I kind of wonder what your perspective is on these questions, how to encourage intercultural empathy, and also how to help children avoid forming stereotypes when people are different.
Hi, Benita. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so happy to be part of this important conversation. As far as encouraging intercultural empathy and understanding within our children, as a family, we've always had a very culturally diverse social circle. So our kids have always been exposed to a diverse group of people. Within our immediate family and our extended family, our children have been engaged in many multicultural experiences. So I feel this has really helped shape how they view others and respect cultural differences. As a parent, Benita, one thing that I remember that really resonates with me and has stuck with me over the years is the difficulty I experienced with my son my biracial son, when he really experienced personal issues when he transitioned from a predominantly white elementary school to a more racially balanced middle school. He really was having a power struggle or an identity struggle within himself, and he felt as though he wasn't white enough, he wasn't Black enough. And as a parent, and especially as a white parent, not a mixed parent, I can't relate as much as I want to, as much as I can talk about my own personal experiences and what I've dealt with as being in an interracial marriage. I really just felt helpless as a parent. So, really what I could try to do to really, empathize with him and encourage empathy was just to remind him to embrace his differences. And, just like we teach him to embrace his differences, embrace others' differences. We've always encouraged our children to try to educate and be leaders and, educate those who may offend them or may not understand their own biases. And if they can't do it with words, then do it by their actions. But don't ever let another person's ignorance influence who they are or how they act.
Absolutely. Don't let them pull you down. Excellent advice.
Exactly.
Niani Haley, I just kind of wonder, as a social worker in Chesapeake Public Schools, you must have some interesting stories to share and a perspective on this.
Yes, ma'am. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I like to think of empathy as a social worker as heart work. And we do a lot of discussion about our thoughts and our patterns and how that changes. But I will be honest, and I think that for our younger students and really all of our students, we have this discussion of what does that feel like to be uncomfortable? And I feel like we have to sit in that for a little bit. When we feel uncomfortable, we realize what that feels like for someone else. And I think that innately cuts down on the stereotype. If someone believes something about me because of how I look, and I remember what that felt like, I'm more prone to not repeat that. And so I encourage a lot of our students here in Chesapeake to just ask questions. And I know that sometimes we just have to frame it and say, I'm sorry if this offends you, but I really am trying to understand. And I think sometimes we hide in fear and don't ask the uncomfortable question in fear that the uncomfortableness will make it better in some way, and that perpetuates the stereotype. And so I think that I like to just frame empathy in sitting in that uncomfortable moment and just think of, how can I generate a question? How do I get understanding? And how do I make sure that somebody else doesn't feel this level of uncomfort? We have to change just the thought but we have to change our hearts. We have to look inside of ourselves. We have to do some soul searching. And I really like to think of empathy as the heart work that needs to get done after the discussion is had.
Absolutely. Excellent point. Okay, to shift gears a little bit, Brenda Solomon, I want to come to you with this next question, and it's about advocacy. How do you advise your children? Oh, my screen just switched over on me. Oh, well, the screen is there though.
Yeah, you're good.
So sorry. Okay, so Brenda, how do you advise your children to intervene when they see an injustice? And how would you advise your children to advocate for themselves if they feel they're being mistreated because of their race?
So what I've advised my children in this situation is to kind of analyze the situation, and depending on the nature of the situation, think about ways of how to react that it's going to benefit everyone, if possible, because sometimes it doesn't work that way. Just think about it, analyze the situation, because there's situations at times where you could possibly be hurt or killed. It all depends on the situation. Just think before you react. Try to think positive about it, because a lot of times we tend to get defensive. We automatically assume because of stereotypes or whatnot. And I just ask them, just stop for a second, take a deep breath and think about it, because sometimes we react without thinking and make the situation worse. So that's what I like to advise my boys. I have 2 teenage boys, and again, coming from a biracial family, my kids look African American. My youngest son has experienced some racial little situations here and there, nothing serious, but it bothers him. And we sit down and we talk together with my husband as well, and we provide solutions. We like to tell our children, don't come to us with complaints, because we always have these conversations or whining about certain things. Do you have a solution? How can we be proactive to address this and ensure that it benefits everyone? So that's what we do. To me, communication is key. And if we can sit down with our children and communicate with them early on, I think we will prepare them for what's next in real life when they're on their own and we're no longer around them.
Good point. And also, to be cautious about how you bring something up and when you bring something up and when to just walk away. And I think that's an excellent point. Well, Fredo, you were talking about Thurgood Marshall earlier, and I just want to tell a quick story. When my daughter was in the 4th grade at Great Bridge Intermediate, she did a report on Thurgood Marshall. And one of the kids in the class, one of the white boys in the class said, "Who cares about that?" And then he said, "This is always better than this." Another showing the white side of his hand. And so on the playground at recess, one of the black boys in the class came to my daughter and they're like, "Come on, we need to beat him up. Let's beat him up now at recess." And she said, "No, if we do that, then we're just falling into the stereotypes that he already has about black people." So she diffused the situation, calmed it down. And I just, feel like that was a good example of what you were talking about, Brenda. Sometimes, it's, you just can't confront someone if you know it's going to be, an adversarial situation or have the potential to blow up into something violent. You have anything to add about that, Wilfredo or Amina?
I think that's an excellent point, because violence isn't going to get us further as a people, as a community. It's about educating and rising above. Like I said, we have to be overcomers. My children understand and know that this world isn't going to give you anything. You have to be an overcomer, and you're not going to be an overcomer by getting a charge. Like I said, that's not going to help you in life. But what's going to help you is being educated, because they can't take that away from you. And you can educate others. We can't continue to build a foundation if we're being ignorant. We have to build a foundation for others to follow.
That's right. Shannon Gray, would you like to add anything there? Shannon, if you're still with us, you had a story about your son.
I'm sorry. I have lots of stories about my son, but yeah, I'll share another experience. a recent experience, and it was actually a very scary experience. We had a police officer that actually showed up at the door and asked if we were the owners of a certain car. Well, that vehicle happened to be the one that was driven by our teenage son. So immediately my heart stops. And the police officer said, well, no worries, he's fine. But we did receive 2 calls from a citizen who was concerned about him parking where he's parking in front of her house. And so I had to stop and pause for a minute. And I asked the officer, is he parking illegally? And he said, no. I said, well, is he blocking her driveway or in any way disturbing her peace? And he said, no, she's just uncomfortable because her husband's away, he's military, and your son keeps parking in front of her house and it's making her uncomfortable. And I was just very taken back by that. And I had to ask the officer, I said, well, if he's not breaking the law and he's not doing anything, that happens to be the street that his girlfriend lives on. So, thank you for coming out. But, I was very taken back by this. So, I had to have this conversation with my son because, of course, my son was very upset. And I said, instead of being upset and instead of looking at it that way, why don't you and your girlfriend walk over and introduce yourself? And try not to make it a negative. But I really understood, how he felt, but I wanted him to be able to advocate for himself and to introduce himself and to let this woman who clearly had biases, whether they're unconscious, let her meet him and see who he really is.
Absolutely. That's really good. Dr. Jacob, would you like to add anything to this point on advocacy, teaching our children to advocate for themselves and others?
Yes, and I failed to mention, I have 4 children and we're in the Great Bridge area. And part of the reason we chose this area, we were deciding between Hickory and Great Bridge, but I brought it up to my wife that I thought Great Bridge had more diversity. And I grew up in a public school with a lot of diversity. She grew up in a private school, so her experiences,
we had a lot of diversity.
So her experiences were different, and we talked about all that stuff. But as far as advocating for yourself, one thing that I'd like to just bring to attention is to not focus on identifying yourself as Black, white, Asian American. We all know that's obvious when we see somebody. We all know what that is, or even myself. I don't identify myself as a doctor because I have too many identities. I could be a sailor, a doctor, all these things. So what I teach my kids is to advocate for themselves as far as characteristics, good quality characteristics. I'm a hard worker. I am strong. I have integrity, and look for those same type of qualities in other kids. So that way you don't overlook their identity for what you see them as, but you identify with them as with a character trait. So then you can get to know that person on a deeper level.
That's an excellent point. So advocating for principles and integrity within yourself, that's really good. All right, so let's talk about healing now. How do we get to a place of healing with our society? How can we as parents from diverse backgrounds work together to bring about racial healing and reconciliation in our community? Let's see. Brenda, would you like to talk about that? I know you talked earlier about the importance of communication. Would you like to elaborate and how that might be helpful with helping us all heal as a community?
I think as a community, again, communication is key. Talking about our experiences, learning of what other people have been through as well, not just as minorities, but Caucasian families as well. Let's sit down and have a round table, have a conversation. How can we better, situations that cause turmoil or stress us out? How can we look at things differently, move forward with that? Again, we do it with our children all the time, just communicating. I think communicating and not ignoring what's happening, that's the best way to go. I think that together we'll find solutions and recommend things to ensure that we improve. the situation around us, period, whether we're going through it ourselves or we see someone else going through it, but never to ignore it or pretend like it doesn't exist. Like we just put a Band-Aid over it and, hey, it's not happening to us, so just ignore it. It's nor here nor there, it's irrelevant. And I just think that's not right, because we can't move forward like that together as a community. So again, communication is everything.
Yep, I think that's an excellent point. And I actually find some comfort in the fact that we're hearing more about the unfair arrests of Black people, because they have been happening all along, but at least now society is becoming more conscious about it. They're talking about it. So police are learning how to be more sensitive, and they're being trained better, which is very important. And so I think talking about it, like you said, even if it is uncomfortable, it helps. It brings healing. It helps everyone become more aware and more culturally sensitive. Michael and Tanya Harvey, would you like to add anything to that point, getting to healing?
Sure. I think communication is key, but somebody spoke to this a bit earlier, to lead by example with your kids, and I think that's important in the healing process. In the community you live, your children need to see that you have friends from all different backgrounds, you communicate well, you interact. When you have a neighborhood party, you have people from all different cultures, all different backgrounds, and you speak and you talk to them about the different cultures that they encounter. So when you see someone wearing cultural clothing that is specific to their culture, you talk to your children about it so that they understand the differences in people, and that promotes the inclusion that we want. And you want your children to see people and not see them for their differences, but to see them, as we talked about before, as someone that they can connect with on a level outside of culture, race, and all of those things that stand out, that we see, and that are naked to the eye when we see them.
That's right. The qualities that a person has within: honesty, integrity, intelligence, talent in different ways. I mean, we're all so multi-talented. I have yet to meet one person I can't find something good in. So I tell my kids that a lot when they're saying they don't like someone because of this reason or that reason. I say, find the good. There's good in everyone. Shannon Gray, would you like to add?
Yeah, I think it's really important that we work together in the community as parents. Again, I always have a story, but I know that my child experienced another situation when he had a best friend from kindergarten that moved from one area of Chesapeake to another area of Chesapeake. And this, in their teenage years, the child came back and had a whole different view on race. And it was very disheartening, because it was the first time I think my son had ever been called the N-word. And when I spoke with the parents, because I knew that this child was never raised that way, and we were all shocked. It came out that basically when this child moved to the other section of Chesapeake, it was almost popularized to be racist. And so it was very important for us to sit down with the parents and have this conversation, which in turn allowed them to have deeper conversations with their child. And he was able to recognize his behavior and realize that this truly wasn't his beliefs, and that he was basically, just trying to be with the in crowd. And, I'm thankful to say that we were able to have conversations with our son, and he really was understanding and able to forgive. And to this day now, in their early 20s, they remain best friends. But I say all that to say, Benita, it's just important for us as a community to really work together, to have these conversations and help our children really learn and embrace differences.
Can I just chime in? I just wanted to say that we did have one of our attendees just commend Shannon about what she had her son do as far as opening up the opportunity to change someone else's biases. So she wanted to give you kudos for turning that situation from a negative to a positive and making that a learning experience for both of them. So great job, Shannon.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yes, and I think Yanni wanted to say something in reference to racial actually in reference to advocacy. Did you want to say something, Yanni?
I did. I mean, I feel like I would miss out on an opportunity to advocate as a social worker. That is my primary function, to advocate and to teach that skill. And I always tell all of my students that advocacy starts with kindness. I'm a big believer in, we all don't have to agree, but we must understand one another. And I feel like that's the biggest part about advocacy. If we can get to common ground and understanding, we might be able to jumpstart to something else. But I think if we get our defense mechanisms up, kindness falls out the window, we're not even communicating from the same place. Healing, nor empathy, nor any of the common themes that we've talked about here tonight will even start. And so overall, I just would like to say that advocacy starts with kindness.
Very good. And that just as racism is learned behavior, being culturally sensitive can also be learned behavior. So I think there's hope for our society and our community. And just having conversations like this gives us hope, because I know that our collective goal is to help our children develop a healthy racial identity while appreciating and respecting others. So where do we go from here, panelists? Any final words of wisdom about what we hope this discussion will bring about in our communities and our circles, areas of influence?
I'll go. I'm
Okay.
hoping that this causes more conversations. And as a community of Chesapeake, or as the community of Hampton Roads, that we begin to have more conversations with each other. And we're celebrating humans, and we're celebrating their cultures, and that diversity is what makes us unique, and it makes things better. And if we can have those conversations with children when they're younger, then they can help maybe some adults that aren't quite so open to their opinions, whether that is about race or ethnicity or gender or sexual orientation. Because again, at the end of the day, we're all human, and we really can learn from our children because they're more accepting of all of these things that are different. And at least we hope, and that we're not instilling what our former beliefs are on them, and that we kind of allow them to continue with diversity is cool. And it's one of those things that we want people to be different than us or like us because of our common interest. And so the more conversations that we have, hopefully there aren't going to be parts of Chesapeake that are different. And that if they go and move to a different community, they're not coming back with a different belief system, because we work hard as parents at a young age to make sure that we are instilling good things in our kids. And I would hope that we as a community can all sort of level that playing field a little bit and all be on the same page, because it shouldn't matter what borough you're from.
Yep, agree. Anyone else? Any final thoughts from any of the other panelists?
Yeah, I just want to add, as parents too, we have to extend grace, and we don't always get it right. I remember my 5-year-old son at the time. We were. Can you guys hear me? I'm so sorry. If you
We
guys
can hear you, but your audio is a little distorted.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me better now? I'll kind of pass it if you guys can't hear me.
We can hear you a little bit better. I turned off your video just to make sure if you could stop your video on your end and just see if that helps.
Sometimes that improves the signal. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Just go back. I'll jump in on my phone so you guys can hear me clearly. Just keep going. I'm sorry.
Okay, we definitely want to hear what you have to say, so please do.
Absolutely. Well, I certainly appreciate everyone for coming together, taking time out of your busy schedules to have this discussion. I just appreciate us being able to talk like this and engage with each other in a thoughtful, respectful, and productive way. So I just want to thank all the panelists and see if anyone else has any other final remarks. If not, I will turn it back over to you, Lisa.
I have one last statement, Ms. Harris, is from the standpoint of, we want to teach our children to be change agents, right? And make sure that we're a part of the change and breaking the chain, right? To make sure that the injustices and their stereotypes, and making sure that we're trying to be more inclusive and break and break that diversity, or encourage diversity amongst ourselves. So one of the things that, you know, if we take that away, is how can we ask, how do you feel about a certain situation, or how did that make you feel, no matter what your skin color is, and get that perspective from all facets, and to make it a more of a well-rounded person as an individual. And that's what we want to instill in our daughter.
Very true. We are fortunate to live in Hampton Roads and Chesapeake, which does have a lot of racial diversity, more than, you know, a lot of places in the country. So hopefully we can all learn from that and capitalize on that and help our children, you know, become more culturally sensitive people.
I think Mr. Holloman.
Anyone else?
I think Mr.
What'd you say,
Holloman.
Lisa?
Mr. Holloman came back on. Mr. Holloman, are you there?
I am. Can you guys hear me better now?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
So sorry. I just wanted to say to all the parents too, is that we have to extend ourselves grace, and we don't always get it right. One of the things that, and I'm a foster parent too, and so I'm a, you know, sort of a new parent, and I didn't get it right all the time. And what I had to do, definitely living in the Great Bridge community, is to educate myself. And so I recall my 5-year-old, we were at the store one evening, and he seen a Muslim man, and he stopped and he was just staring, and he was asking, like, what is he wearing? And my first reaction was to hush him. And we went back in the car, and we really didn't talk about it. And it wasn't until I had a deep reflection and I started to educate myself to handle that situation incorrectly, whereas it was a time to teach my son so he can have an understanding. Because if I just hush him, he's going to create those biases and those prejudices against others, and that's not what I wanted to happen. And so we have conversations right there on the spot now when he has, you know, different questions or whatnot. And so you know, I did feel bad originally, but I did extend grace to myself and kind of slow down to educate myself. And now we can have open and honest conversations no matter where we're at, because, you know, life is about teaching moments too. And so I just wanted to just kind of let everyone know is that we're not always going to get it right, but it's going to come another time where we can make a better choice than what we had before.
I'm so glad that you were able to come back on and make that point, because I thought you guys all got it right all the time, because you're doing such a wonderful job on this panel. I thought I was the only one that didn't always get it right. So thank you so much, Eugene Holloman, for sharing that perspective. That's an excellent point. Turn it into a teachable moment whenever we can. Okay, Lisa, do I hand it off to you from here?
Sure, I'll take it over. No one else has anything else that they want? Any final thoughts? Dr. Jacob, Benia family, Niani? Brenda?
I do have one final thought. And Mr. Holloman, you did make you jogged my thought process to say, it's interesting that I have one identity, my husband has another. I'm Dominican and Puerto Rican, my husband is African American. And it is so interesting that neither of my daughters know their identity just yet. So I will encourage parents to allow your children to make their own identity and to not pass on what you think they should be. Because I have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old daughter. And every time I tell my daughter, you know, you're Latina. And she's like, what is that? And so it is an interesting construct that we as adults understand, but kids don't always. And so I would just encourage parents to allow your kids to come into their own identity, whatever that will be, because they may just identify as human and not one race over another.
Great point. Great point.
My comment piggybacks perfectly off that, and it's just don't focus on the identity. Just remember who you are. That's the bottom line. Are you an empathizer? Are you going to take the time to understand other people, and don't let, even if you're beaten down, if someone stereotypes you, Wilfredo already said he gave plenty of examples of other people overcoming challenges, and they were probably under extenuating circumstances too. So we are very resilient as a human race. So you can overcome anything. So even if you get prejudiced upon or stereotyped upon. Just remember who you are.
Point.
Right. Very good. You know, it makes me think about that metaphor of America as a melting pot. Are we really a melting pot where we should all just melt together and become the same? Or are we more like a stew where we all have our own individuality and different flavors and different things to bring to the pot? So.
Excellent point. Thank you. I do want to say one final thought. I think it's very important that we make teaching cultural diversity intentional, and it's important that we think of this almost like a safety habit. When you're teaching safety, it's an ongoing thing. You're always using things as a teachable moment, and I think as parents, we need to make sure that we do that too. We don't just stop today and end the conversation. This has to be a continual conversation. And that's the only way we'll move in the right direction. So again, our goal is to continue as Chesapeake Public Schools to promote awareness, understanding, acceptance, and inclusion of others, regardless of class, age, gender, sexual expression, or ethnicity. With that being said, we want you to hear from you through our Let's Talk app, and that's here on our screen. And through that app, parents, students, community members, and stakeholders are encouraged to provide feedback, comments, recognition, celebrations, anything that you feel that you need us to know. Please feel free to use this app. Information is anonymous. You don't have to give your name or your information. And we're planning to use this information as we guide our future planning, particularly with our Equity Council. So please use that app to give us any information or feedback. Additionally, there are several resources that parents may find useful to promote healthy conversations about race. Hanover Research recently created a resource guide, guiding racially focused conversations with your children. This information can be found on the web using the keywords Hanover Research Race Resource. PBS also has a variety of topics about race, including articles and video chats. The link to this information is included in this slide, and we will make this available through a PDF. For parents that are interested in podcasts, we have Nice White Parent, and this is a series that delves into the 60-year relationship between white parents and the failing public schools down the block. And lastly, Today's Parent has posted at least 30 books to help you talk with your children about race and racism. You can't go wrong with any of these additional resources, so I ask you to please feel free to use those. The next slide I'd like to go over, we have, can you guys hear me okay? I just heard an echo. I'd like to thank Dr. Holloman. He is an author and motivational speaker. If you have a middle or high schooler and looking for a good book to read, check out this book series entitled The Athlete Student. This fictional book follows the journey of a football player as he navigates the stress of performing high level on the field and in the classroom while managing many other challenges as a student athlete. This book is available in paperback and on Kindle. Thank you, Dr. Holloman, for allowing us to share your special talent.
Thank you, Dr. Holloman, and congratulations on earning your doctorate today. I think today is the day you got
it. Thank you. Thank you.
This concludes our webinar, Talking to Our Kids About Race, and we hope you found that this webinar was inspiring, engaging, and empowering. And I would like to thank all of our panelists, our parent panelists, Ms. Benita Billingsley-Harris, for your courageous conversations. In most cases, our webinars are placed on our Chesapeake Public YouTube channel, and we will do this one as well. Thank you for joining us, and remember, families and communities work better together. Thank you.